Matt Albence, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. And for the purpose of the interview and for the viewers, we're going to be discussing a major story, but one that has been really hardly ever covered, in my estimation. And Matt, I should tell the viewers that while you are currently working with Phillip Morris International, you are also the former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or known as ICE. A lot of times people think of that merely as stopping the illegal aliens coming over from the southern border. But there is also, and this is part of the major story, some of the just major illegal trade going on across the country, and it's a major factor in Illinois. And before we start, let me just say, we see here that trafficking in illegal tobacco products is called a national security threat, which I'm sure you'll be able to inform us about some, and that Illinois also ranks 10th in the U.S. in human trafficking. Human trafficking earns globally about $150 billion a year. So the short and long of it is there are a lot of bad actors, gangs, international gangs, and while we tend to think of them as being very far away from where we live, the fact of the matter is they are not, and they are operating in Illinois as well as other major places. With that as a setup, what more can you tell us about where we are and what's happening now, what you're doing now with Phillip Morris International to help combat this?
Oh, thanks, Terry, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And you're right. This is an issue that doesn't get as much attention as it really does deserve. A lot of times people think illegal trade or buying a counterfeit Gucci purse on the street is a victimless crime. But in reality, the profits that these criminal organizations make off of illegal trade and counterfeited products and pirated products go back to fund these criminal organizations. And these criminal organizations don't just specialize in one or two criminal activities. They don't just produce fraudulent, again, DVDs or Gucci purses or NBA jerseys or anything of the sort. A lot of the things that they counterfeit have very dangerous applications should somebody use them. So whether it's fake medications, fake airbags. I mean, just think of the example of an individual buying an airbag for their vehicle, thinking they're going to have something that's going to protect them or their family, only to have it be a product that is not up to standards and probably won't do what it's supposed to do in the event it's needed. I think what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, and hopefully people realized just how ruthless some of these organizations are, how they came out within days of the pandemic striking and the need for masks and PPE, that these factories over mainly in China and that area of Asia that were producing counterfeit Viagra or counterfeit DVDs or any sort of other illegal good changed their manufacturing process and started producing PPE. And of course, the PPE was substandard, meet requirements. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. And the worst part was it was preying upon of individuals here in this country that were just, and frankly, who were just trying to take care of their families and keep life throughout the pandemic. And a lot of that PPE that was seized was destined for first responders, nurses, doctors, law enforcement personnel, firefighters, people on the front line were in a position where they're going to get PPE that didn't do what it was supposed to do and putting them in further harm than they were already volunteering to do because of their job. So it really is dangerous when it comes to that. But then you start looking to see where this money goes, and that's really where the crux of the issue lies. These criminal organizations and these cartels that are involved in this trade and provide the routes for these illegal goods to be transited, they're involved in all sorts of other things. They're involved in weapons trafficking. They're involved in human trafficking. They're involved in terrorism. They're involved in narcotics trafficking. All of these things. If you're trying to pass whatever type of contraband across that southern border, a cartel. And it depends where you're crossing. It depends which cartel you're paying, but you are paying a cartel, and you're paying transnational criminal organizations on every step of that route to get that product here into the United States. And that money goes back to finance terrorism and finance other criminal organizations and other and it's it's not a victimless crime. It's definitely not a victimless crime with regard to those companies that are losing property and intellectual properties and economic viability. But there's a lot more heinous these groups are involved in. And you mentioned some of the fact that Illinois ranks up there with regard to human trafficking. Unfortunately, these organizations they treat beings just as they treat a counterfeit PPE mask. They don't care about them. They don't care what happens to them. They are just a dollar sign, and that is all they care about. And it's unfortunate they would treat human beings in that fashion, but they do. And we've seen it time and time and again.
And we see, I mean, right now, we just saw over the 4th of July, the amount of shootings, the amount of killings, and these are not just necessarily just some punks on the street. There's a lot of time, this is the drug trade, I would say, behind this, as well as, first of all, not just the PPE as you were mentioning, but we also see from reports of how many people are coming over the border right now, the amount of fentanyl that's coming in, the amount of people that are dying from fentanyl across the year. I think it was around 2019, 2018, as I recall, something like 50,000 people died from overdoses, and we had police and fire departments across the country saving many people's lives. I forget the drug that they used to save the life, but
Narcan.
Yeah, Narcan. I mean, that's in 1 year, the amount of people that we lost basically in the Korean War over 3 years of fighting, to have 50,000. So this is, as you say, not a victimless crime, and it's not something, when we talk about what's happening at the border, that is far away from us and not impacting us if we live in central Illinois, or if we live in Chicago, or frankly almost anywhere in the United States. With the amount of, so with that, what do we do? And by the way, I should say that one of the things we talk about Phillip Morris, there is a lot of illegal sales of cigarettes being done by these gangs. And while that may seem innocent enough, my understanding, I'd ask you to talk to it, that these sales are in themselves a national security threat, to the extent that they are a quick source of easy money for these gangs to then fuel other activities that they engage in. If you could talk to that.
Certainly, and you mentioned the shootings and the gangs involved, and it all comes down to money. Every single one of these criminal organizations, even those with ideologies and involved in terrorist activity, the crimes that they're committing are done for financial benefit, right? It's a profit industry. So whether they're using those profits to feed terrorism training, whether they're using those profits to just feed the greed of these criminal organizations and these cartels, it's a profit motive. And that's one of the things, in addition to the things that law enforcement goes after with regard to the smuggling and the trafficking, it's also the money laundering. All these organizations are involved in money laundering because they need to launder those proceeds. They need to get those profits out of the country to the criminal organizations. And you're right, the cigarette smuggling is one way that they do that. The penalties for smuggling cigarettes or stealing cigarettes are less than a lot of the other crimes that are out there. And so it's a low risk, high reward industry, which a lot of the counterfeit and the trafficking and counterfeit goods is, because the sentencing guidelines are not where they are with comparing smuggling in a tractor load of counterfeit items versus a tractor full of narcotics. So and you mentioned the fentanyl, and that's a huge issue, and it's actually one I think that's sadly imported, because there are a great many people across this country that are dying every single day as a result of this terrible drug. And you start buying these products from these foreign countries, again, most of it's coming from China. You have no idea what they're putting in these products too, right? So there's there's fake Viagra, there's fake medications that are out there. You have no idea in these drugs. First off, they're not going to do what they say they're going to do. But secondly, you have no idea what sort of chemicals or pollutants or bacteria has been introduced into these drugs. They're certainly not manufactured in a sterile environment. And so those that by themselves can make you sick, or they could have terrible reactions with prescription medication that you're taking here. So it's really it touches everything. You don't realize how broadly it goes, and that's really what we're doing right now. So, the reason I'm here and I'm working with Phillip Morris is there's a big private partnership that we just started in the last month called United to Safeguard America Against Illegal Trade. And it has a bunch of really significant companies that have vested interest in ensuring that, one, their products are not pirated or counterfeited, and that people buy a product from them, they know it's safe, and then they know it does what it's supposed to do. And so I think, we've seen, and I've been in law enforcement, I was in law enforcement for 26 years before I retired last year, and there isn't one single agency or single federal government entity, any single local law enforcement agency or any private entity that has the ability to combat the illicit trafficking and trade by themselves, which is why these public partners we're engaged in right now with USAIT are so valuable, because it leverages the resources and the intelligence of both public, private entities to try to help, one, get the message out to the American public and let them know that, one, this isn't a victimless crime, two, don't buy these goods because they're going to hurt you or your family members, and three, the fact that they're, only serving to a bunch of criminal organizations that are doing worse things than beyond what they're doing now with regard to the counterfeiting. Two, we're working very closely with law enforcement. We're providing training, providing assistance at the state and local level. Part of USAIT is the ICE, Intellectual Property Rights and Coordination Center, which, for those that don't know, ICE is the primary federal agency with authority for these types of violations because of its customs authority. Through Homeland Security investigations, ICE works hundreds, if not thousands, of these cases a year. And when we work these cases, they were worked with not taking down just a criminal organization and getting the illegal product off the street, but also seizing the money and trying to shut these organizations down. And so that's why it's important to have these federal partners along with the state and local partners, because generally the state and locals a lot of times are the first ones that would interdict or come across us. A state trooper in Illinois is probably the entity that's going to make a traffic stop of an 18-wheeler that's carrying stolen cigarettes. It's not going to be the federal government because they're not generally engaged in that type of activity. They would come in and help and do the investigation on the back end. But that's why the guys on the street, the men and women of law are so crucial to this effort, and why we're working very closely with them to try to help provide resources for them to do their jobs better and safer.
I want to ask you a couple of other things here, but before I forget to ask, if people want more information, and by people it might be just an average viewer, it might be someone in law enforcement at a local level, if they want to reach out and get more information, how would they do that?
The easiest way to go to our website. It's www.usait.com, and it has a whole host of resources. It has state-specific resources, so specifically for those individuals that live in Illinois, if they want to look up what's going on in their state and what could be done. And then there's contact number and info to get in touch with us. And obviously we're doing it from the same tack coming down to local law enforcement, state and local agencies. So I encourage people to go to it and see it and actually look at some of the numbers that are on that website and show the magnitude of the problem and the challenges that are out there and why we need these critical public-private partnerships.
As much as I want to uncover this story, this is something, you could, I'm sure, do a day-long seminar on it. So no matter how long we record this interview, we're just going to be scratching the surface. I would say to any lawmaker from Illinois out there, and I cover the legislature kind of like C-SPAN does at the federal level, that I could see this being a tremendous, if you and others from Phillip Morris would want to testify before a committee of the legislature, with Illinois being this hub that it is for illegal gang activity. Highway 55 is only about a mile from where I'm sitting. I know from talking to the DEA in the past that it is a major trafficking route, as you just said, bringing up drugs from the southern border. I think this is something that the lawmakers of Illinois should certainly know more about and how they could work with what you're doing to make an impact, not only on the illegal drugs, but as we say, human trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked in Chicago for a couple of years. I ran what used to be the office there and then worked with ICE as well. And you're right, there's a lot of drugs coming on I-55, but there's a lot more than just drugs coming down I-55, and whether it's human beings and whether it's weapons and whether it's money going in both directions. So absolutely, that's what we're out here for. This is an education. Our goal is to provide individuals with the facts, and one, help people to stop buying these goods that they think are, they're getting a good deal on paying $25 for a watch that should cost, $5,000. That $25 is going to go to some very bad people that are going to do some even worse things with it. But certainly, we always look to work with those in the legislative branch to provide them any information that we can that would be helpful for them doing jobs.
Let me ask you something. We hear, and this is technology is always changing. One of the trends we have going on right now, and people know somewhat about it with Bitcoin and other items, but there is a blockchain technology, which I would say for those who don't know, basically it means it records every transaction that one does. And so, do you have any thoughts on blockchain technology? Have people looked at that? Because it seems to me, we have money laundering with paper dollars that gangs have done for years. But I think the blockchain technology would tend to eliminate their ability to launder their proceeds, so to speak. Could you give your thoughts on that to the extent you have some?
No, sure, of course. Look, law enforcement, one of the challenges for law enforcement at any level is to keep up with the various trends that are out there. And a lot of those trends these days are the technological trends. It's how do we ensure that we are using state-of-the-art investigative technique to counteract criminal organizations. So I can tell you that just about every federal agency that's involved in some sort of criminal activity that deals with money laundering or these types of violations is looking to leverage every bit of technology that they can in order to try to shut down these organizations. And most large police departments will also have some sort of capability. There's a lot of task force environments that are out there where you have state and locals working together with federal partners, sharing information technologies. And we've seen it. There was a case, you Google it, in Philadelphia last year that ICE took down with the U.S. Attorney's Office up there with regard to Bitcoin and being utilized to fund terrorists. And the first cases where we were actually able to establish a direct link, and it's there. And so, these that's one thing about these criminal organizations. There is no shortage of ideas. They are very nimble. They don't have bureaucracy. They don't have laws or regulations that they need to follow. Why you saw, within a matter of days of the vaccines for COVID-19 being produced and being authorized for use, that you saw counterfeit vaccines being used, right? Luckily, they didn't reach the United States except for one location that I'm aware of, a small situation, but in South America and Africa, there were known uses of selling of these counterfeit vaccines literally within days or weeks of the vaccines actually starting to be produced. So they are nimble and they are ruthless, and it's incumbent upon everybody to do what they prevent these organizations from flourishing. As
I said earlier, Matt Albence, we thank you for joining us. I know you're taking a couple of days off, and I'm interrupting your vacation, so I'm going to let you go. But I would say there's so much information here that needs to be uncovered, and as I said, I would say to anyone from the legislature watching this program, I think it would be good to work with Phillip Morris on this, because we all need to have better information about what is really going on. I often say the gap, and I say this from 30 years of basically covering government, the gap often is not between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. It's between what we think we know and what the reality is. And so often what we need is just good, solid information, so that then we can formulate the strategies and the laws and the regulations that we need to combat the problems that face us.
No, I wholeheartedly agree, and I appreciate you for giving us a forum to share that information, and happy to come and discuss further. Because I think this is an important issue that continues to unfortunately burgeon and grow, and we need to do what we can to try to counteract that. So we appreciate your support and letting us get that message out there, and hopefully we can come back on and do it again.
All right, thank you again, and hopefully we can follow up with you in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.